So a lot of elements went into that scene, but there's a couple basic elements that are important for every scene, and it's things that I wish I would have learned when I started filming. When I first got my camera, I was so excited to get out there. I just got out there, started filming. I used auto settings, I dialed on things to make the scene look better, but I really wasn't sure what I was adjusting, and it was not very repeatable. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the exposure triangle. The exposure triangle is aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, and then the relationship between shutter speed and frame rate. How those three things affect your scene and how they affect each other. Oftentimes, most of the time actually, you can't just touch one without adjusting the others, and we'll get into why that is. So first is the aperture. It's essentially closing off the light that's able to get to the camera's sensor. And the effect of that is either bringing more of the background into focus or allowing the foreground to be in focus and getting that nice bokeh look in the background. The bokeh is that shallow depth of field, blurry effect that you see in a lot of cinematic scenes. The ISO is the sensitivity of the sensor to the light that it's getting. So the aperture is how much light gets to the sensor. The ISO is how it reacts to it. A lower number is going to make the scene darker, a higher number is going to make the scene brighter, but we'll show you later some effects when you get too high with the ISO. Then you have shutter speed and the relationship between shutter speed and frame rate. A general rule of thumb is that you always need to be recording at twice the shutter speed of your frame rate. So if my frame rate is 30, my shutter speed is going to be 60. The faster the shutter speed, you're also limiting light that's getting to the sensor, so you're gonna have to go back and play with your ISO or your aperture or your lighting conditions. Let's go back to our pool ball example now, and I'll show you how those three things work with one another. We're gonna start with frame rate because it's the most interesting, and I need you to stay watching this video as long as possible. At normal speed, different frame rates don't matter as much. If you're watching sports, you'll be able to tell the difference, and movies shoot at a slower frame rate to get that nice cinematic blur. But with slow motion, you can see the low frame rate video just doesn't have enough frames to accurately represent motion. This is actually called temporal undersampling. So let's jump back over to our pool shot and look at how the exposure triangle affects our scene. Okay, so here you see we have our shot set up and our lighting conditions pretty good, but let's say I wanted to bring more of the background into focus, like the cue ball backspin or even the shooter's hand, then I would need to stop down the aperture. So as you can see, it's bringing more of the background in focus, but because we're closing off the light that's getting to the sensor, it's also making the scene much darker. So now that we've got our aperture where we want it and the background in focus, we have to go into the ISO and adjust the sensor's sensitivity to the light that it's given so we can bring the brightness up. But if you go too far with ISO, the effect is that you start to get very grainy. This is called noise, and it's simply visual static. So there's only so much you can adjust with the ISO. At this point, you're gonna need to change your lighting, either the intensity, bring the lights in closer, or add additional lights to it. What if I also wanted to shoot at a high frame rate with this aperture setting? So if I change my frame rate, the shutter speed is now increasing and the amount of light is limited even further. Under these conditions, this scene is unshootable, and the only option is to bring in more light. So we had to move our lights significantly closer to the subject and crank the intensity up to 100% just to get this shot. For the final shot, we wanted to film at 600 frames per second, so we put the aperture back down, and this was the result. Alright, so that was the exposure triangle and frame rates. Hopefully that will help you avoid a lot of the mistakes that I made when I was getting started. If there's something else that you would like us to cover, please leave us a comment, and we'd really appreciate you sharing this video and subscribing to our channel. See you next time.